The ceramic mug, warm with freshly brewed coffee, slipped from my clumsy fingers before I could even utter a warning, and the dark liquid exploded across my pristine white kitchen table, a brown tide relentlessly soaking the corner of yesterday's mail. But I barely registered the mess, my gaze frozen, glued to the cold, unyielding light of the laptop screen, my mind refusing to accept the cruel reality staring back at me. "No," I whispered, the denial a fragile breath in the suddenly silent room. "No, no, no." Where $31,042 should have been proudly displayed in my savings account. A single stark figure mocked me, $0. A tremor ran through my hands as I frantically refreshed the page, praying for a glitch, a temporary error in the digital ether. But nothing changed. The balance remained stubbornly at 0, and a new, chilling transaction materialized in the history. Withdrawal counter, $31,400, with yesterday's date and time ominously stamped beside it. "This has to be a mistake," I muttered, my voice barely audible above the frantic thumping of my own heart, as I snatched my cell phone. The bank's infuriatingly cheerful hold music assaulted my ears for what felt like an eternity, 17 excruciating minutes stretching into a lifetime. Before a bored-sounding customer service representative finally answered, I clutched the phone so tightly my knuckles gleamed white against the plastic, my breath catching in my throat as I stammered out my unbelievable story. "I'm looking at your account now, Miss Abigail," the bank officer droned after a lengthy silence, the kind of silence that precedes a devastating blow. Then came that pregnant pause, heavy with unspoken bad news. "The withdrawal was processed yesterday at 2:14 p.m. at our Maple Street branch." Another pause, this one laced with an unsettling familiarity. "The withdrawal slip was signed by Patricia Abigail." "My mother?" I choked out, the word a disbelieving croak. "That's impossible." But even as the denial left my lips, a sickening certainty coiled in my stomach, a cold dread that whispered of betrayal. "She wouldn't." "I'm afraid she did, Miss Abigail. As a co-signer on the account, she has full withdrawal privileges." The room seemed to tilt precariously, the familiar kitchen suddenly alien and hostile. "But that's my college fund," I gasped, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "My grandparents' gift, my savings from 3 grueling years of weekend shifts at the bookstore." "I understand your concern," the officer said, her voice professionally sympathetic, yet utterly devoid of genuine emotion. "However, legally..." The line went dead. I hung up 15 minutes later, the disconnect echoing the chasm that had just opened in my life. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I drove across town, my hands gripping the steering wheel with a desperate, unnecessary force. The familiar route to my mother's house, usually a comforting path, now felt like a treacherous journey into enemy territory. The sprawling colonial house with its perfectly manicured hedges and cheerful hanging flower baskets loomed into view, a picture of domestic tranquility that now mocked my inner turmoil. Once a symbol of safety and belonging, it now stood before me like a formidable fortress, built specifically to keep me out. I parked haphazardly at the curb, the tires screeching in protest, and strode up the brick walkway, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. When my mother, Patricia, opened the door, her initial expression of surprise swiftly morphed into something harder, colder, more defensive. "Abigail," she said coolly, her tone suggesting I was an unwelcome intruder. "This is unexpected." Without a word, I pushed past her into the impeccably decorated foyer, the air thick with unspoken accusations. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my desperate attempts to maintain control. "Where is my money?" "The $31,000 you took from my account yesterday," I elaborated, the words laced with a raw pain that threatened to shatter my composure. She sighed dramatically, waving a dismissive hand as she smoothly closed the door behind me. "Let's discuss this in the kitchen, dear. Gary's home." Of course he is. My stepfather of 2 years, Gary, stood leaning against the gleaming granite countertop, his arms crossed over his chest, watching me with that infuriatingly smug half-smile that always made my skin crawl. "You weren't being a team player with the new family," my mother announced, leaning against the island as if delivering a carefully rehearsed line. Consider it a lesson in gratitude. The casual cruelty of her words stole my breath, leaving me gasping for air. Gratitude? For what? For the theft of my future? A floorboard creaked ominously overhead, and I instinctively looked up to see Brooke, my stepsister, perched at the top of the elegant staircase, her 18-year-old face pretty and smug, mirroring her father's irritating smirk. "Brooke's going to need that money for her college experience," my mother explained, her voice as light and dismissive as if she were discussing borrowing a sweater. "Cornell is expensive, and she deserves the best start in life." Flash memories assaulted me in rapid succession. Graduation day 2 years ago, my beloved Grandpa Thomas proudly presenting me with a check for $28,000, the tangible result of years of their selfless saving. Mom's tight, insincere smile as the cameras flashed. The grueling part-time job at Books and Brews that allowed me to add another $3,000 to the growing fund. Mom growing increasingly distant and critical after marrying Gary. The subtle, insidious comments about my selfishness for wanting to attend college out of state instead of staying home to bond with Brooke. "That money was my future," I choked out, my voice breaking, betraying the raw emotion I was desperately trying to contain. My mother's eyes hardened, all pretense of maternal affection vanishing. "Maybe you should have thought about that before putting yourself first." From upstairs came the sound of Brooke's laughter, light and amused, echoing through the house, a cruel soundtrack to my devastation. In that moment, something fundamental shifted within me. This house, with its once familiar smells and sounds, was no longer home. These people were no longer family, not in any meaningful way. "I'm leaving," I stated quietly, the words hanging in the air, heavy with finality. "Don't be dramatic, Abigail," my mother sighed, examining her perfectly manicured nails with feigned boredom. "You're overreacting. Where would you even go?" I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and climbed the stairs to what was left of my bedroom, a space Brooke had gradually encroached upon, claiming half the territory for her ever-expanding collection of belongings. I yanked out my old duffel bag from under the bed and began packing essentials, my movements jerky and fueled by a cold, simmering rage. Behind me, my mother hovered in the doorway, her voice laced with annoyance. "This tantrum is unnecessary, Abigail. It's just money. Family is what matters." I paused, my hand hovering over a framed family photo taken years ago, before Gary, before the fractures. Mom, Dad, and a gap-toothed 8-year-old me at Lake Michigan, a lifetime ago. I placed the photo face down on the dresser, a symbolic turning of the page. A text message chimed on my phone. "Grandpa Thomas. I'm outside when you're ready." He knew. Somehow he had anticipated this catastrophic moment. 10 minutes later, I walked out the front door, refusing to grant them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "You'll be back when you realize family is all you have," my mother called after me, her voice sharp with false certainty. I didn't look back. The kitchen table at my grandparents' cozy, familiar house had become my war room. Papers were spread across the worn oak surface like battlefield maps. Bank statements, credit reports, collection notices, each document a fresh, agonizing wound. "Look at the pattern," Grandpa Thomas said, his weathered finger tapping a series of entries on the bank statements. His kind face, usually etched with warmth, was now set with grim determination. October, November, December. Small withdrawals, testing the waters before taking it all. My stomach twisted into a knot as I traced the insidious evidence. $50 here, $200 there, the slow, deliberate bleeding of my account for months before the final, devastating withdrawal. "And these?" I asked, my voice barely steady as I pointed to 3 unfamiliar credit card statements bearing my name. Cards I had never applied for, never activated, never used, all opened within the last year. Grandpa Thomas removed his reading glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose, his eyes filled with a sorrowful understanding. Maxed out within 2 months. The familiar comforting scent of Grandma Eleanor's apple bread filled the small kitchen, but a wave of nausea washed over me, overriding any semblance of appetite. I pushed away from the table and began to pace the worn linoleum floor, the coolness seeping through my bare feet. So it wasn't just impulse, not just the college money. The horrifying realization solidified in my chest, heavy and cold like concrete. She had planned this. For months. My phone buzzed on the table, another text message. I didn't need to check to know who it was from. Mother had been carpet bombing the family with her twisted version of events. Grandpa Thomas picked up his phone, his face hardening as he read the latest missive. Abigail abandoned us after all we've done for her. He set the phone down with deliberate care, as if it were contaminated. She sent similar messages to everyone in the family. Abandonment. The word tasted bitter, like betrayal and injustice. She stole my future and then claimed I had abandoned her. The doorbell rang, shattering the tense silence. Grandma Eleanor's gentle voice floated from the entryway, followed by another familiar voice that made me freeze. Aunt Helen stepped into the kitchen, her unexpected presence a shock. Mother's estranged sister, the family black sheep, whom I had seen perhaps 5 times in my life. Her eyes, so strikingly similar to my mother's, yet utterly different in their directness, locked with mine. "Your mother did the same thing to me 20 years ago," she said without preamble. No hello, no how are you, just raw, cold truth. I sank back into my chair, the breath knocked out of me. "What, my college fund? Smaller than yours, $12,000. She convinced our parents I was using drugs and needed an intervention. By the time they discovered the truth, the money was gone." Helen set her worn purse on the counter with a heavy thud. Gary isn't the first husband she's used as an accomplice either. The scattered pieces of my fractured understanding began to shift and reform, clicking into place with a sickening clarity. The hushed arguments between my grandparents that abruptly ceased when I entered rooms. The strained, awkward holidays, the careful, almost tiptoeing way they had always avoided directly criticizing my mother. Why didn't anyone tell me? Grandma Eleanor entered the kitchen with steaming coffee mugs on a tray, her kind eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "We thought we could protect you by keeping the peace, Abigail. We were wrong." The tuition deadline loomed like an approaching storm. Even with my grandparents' generous offer of room and board, the numbers simply didn't add up. My meager bookstore job barely covered textbooks, let alone tuition. "She tried to access your financial aid forms," Grandpa Thomas said, sliding another damning paper toward me. "The financial aid office called yesterday. Someone claiming to be you requested a change of address for all correspondence." My throat tightened with a fresh wave of panic. "How did you—" Ms. Abernathy at Financial Aid recognized something wasn't right. She's the one who suggested I check your credit report. My phone buzzed again, a social media notification. Brooke had posted a tearful selfie with my mother, the caption dripping with self-pity. "Some children forget everything their parents sacrifice for them." The comment section was already overflowing with sympathy for her and condemnation for me. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. The nights spent staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom in my grandparents' house filled with endless, impossible calculations. The days were a blur of classes and work, punctuated by the constant, anxiety-inducing jump every time my phone buzzed, certain it was another attack. "Abigail Reynolds?" The voice belonged to a woman I had never met before. She stood in the doorway of the bustling financial aid office, her professional badge identifying her as Diane Abernathy, the director. "Yes, that's me," I replied, my heart sinking with a familiar dread. "Come in," she said, closing the door behind us. Her voice lowered with a hint of conspiratorial kindness. "I've reviewed your application again." Another rejection, I thought. The familiar sting of disappointment settling in. "I've seen this before," Ms. Abernathy said gently, sliding a thick folder across her cluttered desk. "We can make this work." The folder contained a scholarship application, already partially filled out with my information. Half tuition, not everything, but enough to transform the impossible into the merely difficult. "Why are you helping me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, raw with disbelief and a desperate flicker of hope. Ms. Abernathy's smile held no pity, only a quiet recognition. "Let's just say I've been where you are, Abigail. Different circumstances, same pattern." That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time since walking out of my mother's house. The restraining order, legally prohibiting Patricia from accessing my financial information, sat on my nightstand like a hard-won shield. The next morning, Aunt Helen arrived again, this time with a small worn leather book. "Your mother keeps a diary," she said, placing a hand on the book. "Not this one. This is just a planner, but she has always kept detailed records of her projects, people she plans to use. She's been planning this since before the wedding, Abigail. You weren't the first, and Brooke won't be the last." Grandpa Thomas's hand rested heavy on my shoulder, a comforting weight. "We enabled her behavior for years," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion, "trying to keep the peace, making excuses, cleaning up messes." I looked at the scattered papers on the table, the stark evidence of a betrayal so fundamental it rewrote my entire childhood. How do I ever trust anyone again? "You start by trusting yourself, Abigail," Aunt Helen said, her gaze unwavering. That voice inside that recognized something was wrong long before you had proof. That's the voice they try to silence first. Through the kitchen window, I saw Grandma Eleanor in her garden, carefully pruning roses, cutting away the dead growth so the healthy stems could flourish. "What now?" I asked, the uncertainty still gnawing at me. "Now," Grandpa Thomas said, picking up the restraining order, "we make sure she can never do this to you again." And then, his eyes met Aunt Helen's, a shared determination passing between them. "We figure out how to get you through college without her." Aunt Helen's smile held no warmth, only a steely resolve. "And maybe, if we're very thorough, we make sure Patricia understands exactly what she's lost by treating her daughter like an ATM." For the first time since my coffee cup shattered on my kitchen floor, I felt something other than fear and betrayal, something that felt dangerously like hope. The text message landed on my otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning like a grenade. "Brooke needs $3,200 for her college apartment. Can you help?" 6 years, 2 months, and 14 days of silence from my mother. And this was what finally prompted her to reach out? Not an apology, not a question about my life, just another demand for money, as if $13,042 wasn't enough. I set my phone down on my sleek glass desk, noting with a detached sense of satisfaction how my hand remained steady. The familiar rush of adrenaline that once accompanied any contact from her had dulled to a minor irritation, like a paper cut that barely stung. Through my office window, the vibrant spring sunshine bathed the bustling city in a warm, golden light. My hard-earned college degree hung proudly on the wall beside my financial analyst certification, both testaments to years of double shifts, relentless scholarship applications, and a stubbornness that still surprised me. My phone buzzed again. "Uncle Robert this time. Your mother is worried sick about you. Time to let bygones be bygones." Then Aunt Patricia. "Family helps family. You've done well for yourself. Now it's your turn." Then Cousin Melissa, whom I hadn't spoken to since high school graduation. "Must be nice having so much money you can ignore your family." The flying monkeys had been deployed. I silenced my phone and calmly finished reviewing the Henderson portfolio before heading to lunch. 6 years ago, this barrage would have sent me spiraling into anxiety. Now, I simply noted the familiar pattern and continued with my day. The voicemail waited until my lunch break. Gary's oily voice filled my car as I unwrapped my sandwich. "Abigail, your mother has been more than patient with your attitude. This continued silence is childish and disrespectful. Brooke needs your help, and family obligations don't disappear just because you've decided to hold a grudge." I deleted the message before he even finished his sanctimonious rant. On my phone screen, a notification popped up, informing me that I had been tagged in a Facebook post. My mother's status update read, "Some people forget where they came from once they taste a little success. Sad how money changes people." 22 reactions, 14 sympathetic comments. The old Abigail would have immediately typed a furious, lengthy defense. The new Abigail took another bite of her sandwich and checked her investment portfolio instead. My cozy apartment welcomed me home that evening, small but entirely mine. The rent was reasonable, my savings account healthy despite starting from absolute zero. The framed photo of my grandparents sat on my bookshelf, a constant reminder of their unwavering support, right next to the carefully organized financial records they had painstakingly helped me establish after everything imploded. I brewed a cup of Earl Grey tea and opened my laptop. The folder labeled Documentation contained 6 years of meticulous record-keeping, screenshots of her relentless social media attacks, recordings of her manipulative voicemails, transcripts of every strained interaction. Grandpa Thomas had taught me well. Paper trails outlast emotional appeals. When my phone finally rang at 9:13 p.m., I answered on the third ring, a sense of grim anticipation settling over me. "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Maddie, darling," her voice dripped with a saccharine sweetness, a stark contrast to the venom in her Facebook posts. "It's so good to hear your voice. We've missed you terribly." "Of course we have. You're my daughter." The subtle emphasis on the possessive pronoun didn't escape me. I know we've had our differences, but that's water under the bridge now, isn't it? Families disagree sometimes. That's normal, but at the end of the day, we're still family. I recognized each manipulative tactic as she deployed it. The gaslighting, differences instead of theft. The normalization, all families have conflict. The appeal to blood ties when convenient. "When will you be returning my $31,040? I asked, my voice remaining calm, almost pleasant. A beat of silence. "Maddie, that's ancient history. We need to focus on moving forward. Brooke really needs your help with this apartment situation." "When will you be returning my $31,042? I repeated, my tone unwavering. "You're being ridiculous." The honey vanished from her voice, replaced by a sharp edge of annoyance. "That money went to family expenses. You benefited too. When will you be returning my money?" My voice remained steady, cutting through her bluster. "Stop being so cold. This isn't the daughter I raised." I almost laughed. "No, it isn't." The mask dropped completely. "You've always been selfish. Your father would be ashamed." I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. A boundary, 6 long years in the making. My grandfather called the next morning. "Your grandmother and I received quite the earful from your mother last night. Are you okay, Abigail?" "Yes," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time in days. "It takes more than Patricia's tantrums to rattle us now." "We've been fielding these calls for years," he chuckled wearily. "I'm sorry they're putting you through this." "Don't be," I said firmly. "Standing up to bullies never gets easier, but it definitely gets more satisfying." My phone chimed with an email notification. Aunt Helen had publicly responded to my mother's latest social media attack. "Interesting how you conveniently never mentioned the $31,042 you stole from Abigail's account, Patricia. Perhaps we should focus on that family obligation first." Messages from college friends followed. "We've got your back, Abigail. Need anything? Just say the word." Even my usually stoic boss stopped by my desk. "Family stuff can be rough, Reynolds. Take a mental health day if you need it." The unexpected support surrounded me like a warm, protective armor as the week progressed and the pressure on my mother intensified. Each flying monkey received the same concise response. "My mother stole $31,000 from me. When she returns it, we can discuss family obligations." The shocked silence that followed each time was deeply, profoundly satisfying. Saturday afternoon found me at my grandparents' house, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee at their familiar kitchen table. "I keep waiting to stop feeling hurt," I admitted to Grandpa Thomas, tears finally breaching my carefully constructed defenses. "But I don't think that day will ever come." He covered my hand with his weathered one, his touch a comforting anchor. "You don't stop feeling it, Abigail. You just stop letting it control you." His simple words settled something deep within me. I had been waiting for an apology that would never come, for a sense of closure that only existed in the unrealistic narratives of movies. The real freedom I was beginning to understand lay in acceptance. Monday morning, I called my lawyer, Ms. Chen. "What's the statute of limitations on financial fraud in our state?" 7 years, she answered promptly. "Are you finally ready to discuss legal options?" "Just preparing for every possibility," I replied, a newfound sense of resolve hardening my voice. I set up new email filters that evening. All communication from family members was routed to a special folder, meticulously preserved as evidence, but no longer able to disrupt my hard-won peace. My therapist had diligently helped me prepare responses for every conceivable manipulation tactic. The certified letter arrived 3 weeks later. The return address showed my old bank. Inside, a business card was paper-clipped to a sealed envelope. The bank officer's handwritten note read, Abigail, I found something you should see regarding your account closure. My hand trembled slightly as I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of the original withdrawal slip, Patricia's unmistakable signature bold beside the printed words, "Reason for withdrawal, tuition payment." The security camera's still photo, grainy but undeniable, showed my mother and Gary at the teller's counter, the timestamp matching the fraudulent transaction. I slid the copies back into the envelope, my own handwriting precise and controlled on the address label. No personal note, no "Dear Mom," just cold professional language citing exact figures. $31,042 withdrawn on June 17, 2017, plus accrued interest at the standard savings rate over 6 years, $4,526.88. Total $35,568.88. The certified mail receipt cost $3.75. Money well spent for irrefutable proof they couldn't deny receiving it. My counteroffer sat starkly at the bottom of the page. I will consider helping Brooke when my $31,040 plus 6 years of interest is returned in full. The postal worker stamped the receipt. Someone's in trouble, she joked. I didn't smile. Someone certainly was. 3 days later, Susan from reception called my desk extension. Her voice hushed with a mixture of alarm and amusement. Abigail, there's someone here demanding to see you. She says she's your mother. My stomach clenched, but I had prepared for this. I stood, straightened my crisp blouse, and walked calmly to the lobby. Mom paced like a caged animal, her designer purse clutched tightly against her chest. When she spotted me, her voice rose to a theatrical pitch. There you are! How could you send such a heartless letter? Your sister needs you. Heads turned, exactly what she wanted. This isn't the place for this discussion, I said quietly, my voice cutting through her dramatic outburst. When is the place? You won't answer our calls. Brooke is devastated. My daughter is abandoning her sister when she needs her most. Mr. Thornhill from accounting paused by the water cooler, watching with undisguised interest. 2 of my team members hovered near the elevator, concern etched on their faces. Your daughter stole $31 from me, I stated, my voice steady and unwavering. That's the only abandonment that occurred here. Mom's face flushed crimson. That money was family money. We needed it for Brooke's education, which you took without asking. Without permission, I corrected her icily. I was on the account. It was perfectly legal. Legal isn't the same as right. I checked my watch. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Please leave before security is called. Mom's voice cracked, the carefully constructed facade of injured motherhood beginning to crumble. After everything I've done for you. When I didn't respond, she turned to the small audience that had gathered. My daughter won't help her sister with a tiny amount for her apartment after all the sacrifices I made raising her alone. Susan, who had heard the whole story over lunch last month, stepped forward. Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave the premises. Mom sputtered, clutching her purse tighter. This is how you treat family, Abigail? This is who you've become? I didn't flinch. This is who you taught me to be. As security approached, she stormed out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Mr. Thornhill met my eyes, a flicker of respect in his gaze. That took guts, Reynolds. Even my boss, watching from the hallway, gave me a subtle, approving nod. The text started that evening. Mom, you've made your point. Let's discuss this like adults. Gary, your behavior today was completely unprofessional. We're trying to reach a reasonable solution. I forwarded each message to Ms. Chen without responding. Grandpa Thomas called after dinner. They contacted us today. My hand tightened around the phone. What did they want? Gary tried the Reasonable Businessman Act. When that didn't work, he suggested we might want to influence you before things get complicated. My throat tightened. I'm so sorry they're dragging you into this. Don't you worry about us, he said, his voice firm. Helen filed the cease and desist letter this afternoon. Any further contact, and we proceed with harassment charges. Later that night, I saw Brooke's tearful video on social media. Family means standing together through hard times, she sniffled into the camera. I never thought I'd be abandoned by my own sister when I needed her most. The comment section filled with sympathetic responses until Aunt Helen dropped her bombshell. Tell the truth about the $31,042 your parents stole from Abigail's college fund to pay for your apartment, Brooke. Then we can talk about family obligations. The whispers started among family friends. Mom's church group suddenly had scheduling conflicts when she tried to organize the annual fundraiser. Two of Gary's business associates asked uncomfortable questions about that situation with your stepdaughter's money. Brooke's direct message arrived a week later. I didn't know about the money, I swear. Then Mom's text. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding about the funds. Gary's followed shortly after. We should discuss this face-to-face like adults. No need for lawyers. I deleted them all. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Heavy cream paper, expensive letterhead. Davidson, Price & Associates, attorneys at law. I laughed out loud as I read their pompous claim of familial financial obligation and moral responsibility to support immediate family members in need. Grandpa Thomas reviewed it that evening, his face grim. They're actually trying to intimidate you legally. This is a new low. I pulled out the folder the bank officer had given me last month. Inside, copies of the withdrawal slips. Mom's signature bold and unwavering next to reason for withdrawal, tuition payment. The grainy security camera still showing Mom and Gary at the counter. The timestamp a damning match to the transaction. Let them try, Carl, I said, feeling strangely calm. I'm not the one who should be afraid of what a judge might say. Grandpa Thomas squeezed my shoulder, a proud glint in his eyes. You've become quite the strategist, Maddie. For the first time in years, I felt not just angry, but powerful. I learned from the best, I told him, a wry smile playing on my lips, just not in the way Mom intended. The legal letter sat on my kitchen counter like a venomous snake, coiled to strike. Familial financial obligation printed in bold at the top, as if family could be reduced to a cold, calculated financial transaction. I traced my finger over the embossed letterhead of Whitman and Associates, wondering how much my mother had paid for this elaborate intimidation tactic. My phone buzzed. Aunt Cheryl, my mother's youngest sister, again. Abigail, she said when I answered, her voice honey-sweet with insincerity. I was hoping we could talk. An hour later, she sat across from me at my small kitchen table, stirring sugar into tea she hadn't touched. Your mother is devastated by this rift, Abigail, Aunt Cheryl said, placing her hand over mine. I resisted the urge to recoil. Can't you just help Brooke this once? For family peace? I sipped my tea, buying time. The same family peace that vanished the moment my mother stole $31,042 from me. Aunt Cheryl's smile tightened, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. You've done so well for yourself despite everything. Her eyes darted around my modest but comfortable apartment. Surely you understand that success comes with certain obligations to those who raised you. Obligations, I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue like a forced confession. She left 20 minutes later, her mission clearly unaccomplished. As I closed the door behind her, my phone rang. It was my boss. Abigail, I received a strange call today, he said without preamble, his tone laced with concern. Someone suggesting we should review your financial history due to instability concerns. Care to explain? My stomach twisted into a knot. Gary. The calls kept coming throughout the week. Distant cousins taking sides on Facebook, an uncle questioning my grandparents about what really happened. The insidious whispers spreading through our extended family like a toxic poison. Then, on Saturday morning, Brooke appeared at my door, her eyes red-rimmed, clutching her phone like a lifeline. I can't handle a roommate, she blurted before I could even speak. The apartment Dad and Patricia found cost more than my housing allowance. They said you owed us. She looked down, shame and resentment warring on her young face. Me? I stepped back, allowing her hesitant entry into my small sanctuary. She hovered near the door, as if poised for a quick escape. They told you I owed you $31,042? I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Not exactly, Brooke wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. They said family helps family, and you weren't being fair after everything they did for you. I almost laughed, the sound hollow and devoid of humor. What exactly did they do for me, Brooke? Her silence answered everything. The conference room at Wellington Legal gleamed with polished mahogany and supple leather chairs. My lawyer, Miss Chen, arranged her notepad with meticulous precision, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the nervous energy thrumming beneath my skin. I smoothed my skirt, checking my watch. They arrived 5 minutes late. A calculated power move, no doubt. My mother swept in first. A Chanel suit and strategically placed pearls her armor for battle. Gary followed closely behind, his hand possessively at her back. Brooke skulked behind them, her eyes darting nervously around the opulent room before settling on the plush carpet. Their lawyer, a silver-haired man with ostentatious monogrammed cufflinks, nodded curtly as introductions were made. "I understand we're here to discuss some family matters," he began, his voice rich with condescension. "Something about an apartment for the younger daughter." "Before we discuss Brooke's apartment needs," I interjected, placing a large manila envelope on the polished table, the sound surprisingly loud in the tense silence. "Let's address the existing debt." My mother's practiced smile froze on her face. "Debt? There's no debt between us, Abigail. Just a daughter who abandoned her family." Ms. Chen opened the envelope, removing documents with deliberate care. "The first item," she said, sliding a bank record toward their lawyer, "is the withdrawal of $31,042 on April 17, 2019, at 2:14 p.m. from Abigail Reynolds' savings account." Their lawyer adjusted his reading glasses, his gaze sweeping over the document. "Next," Ms. Chen continued, placing a grainy photograph on the table. "Security footage from First National's Maple Street branch showing Patricia Reynolds and Gary Whitfield at the counter at exactly 2:14 p.m. The color visibly drained from my mother's face. Gary straightened in his chair, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "That's perfectly legal," he interrupted, his voice tight. "Patricia was a co-signer on that account." "Indeed," Ms. Chen agreed pleasantly. "However, the withdrawal slip, this document here, states the purpose as tuition payment for Abigail Reynolds at Brookfield University." She tapped the paper with a manicured nail. "Ms. Reynolds never received those funds." "This is absurd," my mother hissed, her composure finally cracking. "You can't possibly." "We also have this affidavit," Ms. Chen continued, unruffled, "from Bank Officer Thomas Jennings, noting his concerns about the transaction. Particularly interesting is his documentation of Mrs. Whitfield's refusal to provide contact information for Abigail to confirm the withdrawal purpose." The family lawyer leaned toward Gary, whispering urgently. Brooke stared at my mother, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "The statute of limitations for financial fraud in the state," Ms. Chen noted calmly, "is 7 years. We're approaching year 6. Gary attempted to speak, but only managed a strangled stutter. My mother's perfectly manicured nails dug into the expensive leather portfolio she clutched, her knuckles white. I leaned forward, meeting my mother's wide, desperate eyes directly. "Return my money with interest, $38,622.17, or we proceed legally." "You wouldn't dare," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're family." "Family doesn't steal from family," I replied, surprised by the unwavering steadiness in my own voice. "Patricia," their lawyer interjected softly, his gaze sharp, "I advise you to consider this offer very carefully." Tears welled in my mother's eyes, the practiced performance I had witnessed countless times. I remained silent, unmoved. "You have 48 hours to decide," I said, standing. Ms. Chen efficiently gathered the documents as I walked out, my back straight, my steps measured. Through the glass wall, I glimpsed Gary gesturing wildly at their lawyer, his face contorted with fury. My mother sat motionless, staring at nothing. In the parking lot, their raised voices carried across the asphalt, a cacophony of blame and denial. I didn't turn to watch. My phone buzzed with a text from Brooke as I reached my car. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." 26 hours later, Ms. Chen called. "Their lawyer contacted me. They've agreed to your terms." The courier arrived the next morning with a certified check and a brief handwritten note on my mother's elegant monogrammed stationery. "Consider this matter closed." I traced my finger over her familiar, elegant script, folded the note precisely, and dropped it into my shredder. Sunlight streamed through my apartment windows, casting golden squares across the polished hardwood floor. 1 year after the storm had ripped through my life, and I woke without that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. I sipped coffee from my new mug, a solid, substantial ceramic, impossible to break, and studied the framed college diploma hanging proudly on my wall. Next to it, a framed bank statement displayed a healthy balance of $37,246. My recovered money plus hard-earned interest. Justice in numerical form. My phone no longer made me flinch when it chimed. The sound, once a trigger for a cascade of dread, wondering what fresh manipulation awaited, was now just a phone. When the text arrived, "Your cousin Jessica's wedding is next month. Family expects you there." I felt nothing, no spike of anxiety, no surge of anger. I simply set the phone down on my small kitchen counter and continued spreading peanut butter on my toast. An hour later, I still hadn't replied. The boundary stood firm and unyielding, without explanation or defense. "How's the presentation coming, Dr. Winters?" my therapist asked during our weekly session. We didn't talk about Mom anymore, or Gary, or the theft. Instead, we discussed my recent promotion opportunities, my weekend plans with friends, the thriving container garden flourishing on my balcony. "I'm ready," I told her, a quiet confidence in my voice. 6 people from different financial backgrounds. "I'm focusing on practical steps rather than horror stories." She nodded, her gaze forward, not back. That evening, Grandpa Thomas raised his glass at Ferraro's Italian restaurant, his eyes twinkling. "To the newest senior analyst at Westbrook Partners," Grandma Eleanor beamed beside him, her hand squeezing mine. Aunt Helen clinked her glass against mine, her eyes crinkling with genuine pride. My college roommate, Dana, whooped loudly enough to turn heads. My friend Miguel, who had started in the mailroom the same day I began as a junior analyst, grinned and added, "They didn't stand a chance against Hurricane Abigail." No drama, no ulterior motives, just pure, unadulterated celebration. The next day at the community center, I arranged handouts for my financial literacy workshop. A young woman lingered after the others filed out, clutching her purse like someone might snatch it. "My stepfather emptied my account last month," she whispered, her voice thick with shame. $3,000. Everyone says I should just forgive him to keep the peace." I recognized the raw vulnerability in her downcast eyes, the slight hunch of her shoulders. "The most valuable thing I recovered wasn't the money," I told her quietly, my gaze meeting hers with understanding. "It was learning who I am without their approval." A flicker of hope ignited in her eyes, that particular expression of someone realizing they weren't alone in their pain. At home that evening, I finally removed the old family photo from the back of my drawer. Mom, Dad, and 8-year-old me at Lake Michigan. A lifetime before cancer took him, before Gary, before everything fractured. I didn't toss it. That would have required an anger I no longer harbored. I simply placed it in a memory box, alongside other artifacts from a different life. In its place on my dresser stood a new frame, Grandma and Grandpa flanking me at graduation, Aunt Helen with her arm slung over my shoulder at Thanksgiving, Dana and Miguel posing dramatically in front of my new apartment building. "Some gardens grow better after pruning," Grandma Eleanor had told me last month, while we planted tomatoes on my balcony, her weathered hands patting the soil with a quiet certainty. The realtor's business card sat on my counter beside a stack of promising house listings. The recovered money, combined with my diligent savings, equaled a substantial down payment. A home of my own, built entirely on my own terms. When my phone rang with an unknown number, I almost let it go to voicemail. Work habit made me answer. "Abigail?" The voice was hesitant, achingly familiar. "Brooke." My pulse remained steady. "Can I?" A pause, thick with unspoken words. "Can I ask your advice?" The setting sun painted my apartment walls a warm, fading orange as I considered my response. Not my responsibility, but perhaps my choice. "I can listen," I said finally, watching the light change. "But I need honesty in return." I heard her exhale, a shaky breath of relief. The conversation began, on my terms, as the day faded into evening. The valuable lesson woven through the story is the importance of recognizing and acting upon betrayal, even when it comes from those closest to us. True strength lies not in blindly forgiving those who cause harm, but in establishing healthy boundaries and prioritizing your own well-being. Sometimes, family is a construct built on manipulation and self-interest, and severing those ties, though painful, can be the most empowering act of self-preservation. Don't let guilt or societal expectations trap you in toxic cycles. Trust your instincts, document everything, and seek support from those who genuinely value your well-being. Your future is yours to build, independent of those who seek to diminish it. What are your thoughts on Abigail's journey? Have you ever faced similar challenges? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more empowering narratives.